Yeah.
Well, I'll sit.
Okay. Yeah, you gotta get a front row seat to the presentation by the doctor. Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, first off, I want to thank obviously Brad and Mara for hosting us all today. That's great, especially because they now have a beautiful baby squid. So. So yeah, it's fantastic that they are continuing to host this wonderful group, and I'm excited tonight to talk, as Brad said, about the music and the sacred. And so as we kind of head into Lent, obviously Lent is a season filled with music. Oftentimes Lent would not be complete without the Kyrie, for instance. And so I was really trying to think of what did I want to talk about, because music and the sacred, we could have a whole seminar on that. And so, there we go. So, as I said, music has a profound role in the liturgy. Entire books have been written about how music and silence play a role in Mass and in the worship of God. There's been numerous papal decrees over the centuries addressing not only music's importance, but also down to the nitty-gritty of what type of music. Should it be polyphonic? Should it just, be chant? Obviously, there's this whole ongoing debate all the time about, do acoustic guitars belong at Mass? We've even been treated to musical popes over the centuries. So many of you might have already seen some of the YouTube videos where Pope Benedict XVI was actually playing the piano, and he was quite a skilled pianist even from his very early youth. So music plays an enormous role both in the worship of God and also really in the liturgy and the Mass. And so, as I said, controversy has been abound, and this is nothing new. We might be a little bit short-sighted to think that this acoustic guitar kerfuffle is a relatively new phenomenon, but it's actually not. So way back in 1324, so Pope John the 22nd, in 1324, he released a document. And it's quite a long quote, and I thought about cutting it down, but it's so vicious that I want to really include the whole quote because it's so good. And so he says, these composers, knowing nothing of the true foundations upon which they must build, are ignorant of the church modes, incapable of distinguishing between them, and cause great confusion. The great number of notes in their composition conceals from us the plain chant melody. These musicians run without pausing. They intoxicate the ear without satisfying it. They dramatize the text with gestures, and instead of promoting devotion, they prevent it by creating a sensuous and indecent atmosphere. So he was, as I said, a very vicious quote. He loved the chant. He was all about Gregorian chant, but this was also the time that you started to get a lot of harmonies built in, a lot of counter melodies, and he was absolutely having none of it. Obviously, in the long run, he lost that argument. So we got great musical pieces from Mozart, from Handel. So I very much am glad that Pope John the 22nd lost this argument. But the argument goes on. So let's see here.
You may be able to click on
Yeah, there we go. So I've mentioned, essentially this battle of the bands, Gregorian chant, acoustic guitar, various verbiages that we use in the musical liturgy. But I'm going to kind of disappoint you all tonight. Going into that internecine war is actually not what I want to talk about tonight. That's a great discussion, and I'm sure we all have very strong opinions about what music belongs in Mass and what does not. I often, when that argument comes up, think about the South Park parody, where, of course, Eric Cartman has this ridiculous idea of how do I get rich quick? And episode after episode, he tries something new, something different. So this particular episode, he decides, hey, I'm going to form a Christian band. And really what he does is he takes a bunch of love songs and crosses out darling or lovely, and he just puts in the word Jesus. And he's actually quite successful. So the quote I always remember from that episode is, hey, all we have to do to make Christian songs is take regular old songs and add Jesus stuff to them, right? Because that really is what makes MASH, just adding Jesus stuff to the various music. But that's really, as I said, it's a great discussion, but it's not something I wanted to talk too much about tonight. So really going back to that music and the sacred, what I want to hone down in tonight is, what does music say both about our souls and to our souls, especially as we enter into this season of Lent? I really love this illustration. So this is Tartini's Dream. And so Giuseppe Tartini is a famous Italian violinist as well as composer. And he had this fantastical dream one night where a demon played a violin to him, this beautiful sonata. And then he woke up from this dream scrambling to write down what he heard, but he could never achieve the beauty that he heard. And so I think we all know, as both as Christians and as Catholics, that music speaks to our soul, sometimes in a very lovely way, and sometimes in a way that kind of aggravates our soul and really doesn't lead us towards God. And so, before we talk about, what music does to our soul, we have plenty of, evidence. Hey, music has all these fantastic physiological effects. It has all these great positive effects. It fights depression, relieves anxiety, improves learning and memory. It builds confidence in a lot of people. I know many people here, such as Sarah, work a lot with youth, a lot with, building their skills through musical instruments. But of course, music can have some negative effects. Sometimes it's not, a negative effect in the truest sense, but sometimes it is. So oftentimes, dissidence can increase anxiety. You can stir up anger and resentment. Sometimes you can create unease and build tension. That's great during a horror movie. That's not so great during other times in your life. And so, kind of shifting away, though, from what music does physiologically. We're body and soul. So what does music do to our soul if we look at our soul through a musical lens and also as a tool? And so, as I said, music is both a great window into our soul and also a sword. And I mean a sword in kind of the Ephesians sense, where you have this, sword of the Spirit that Paul talks about in Ephesians. And so you can examine this both as a window and as a tool. So, what does a person's taste in music say both about him and society? So I'm not quite sure all of you will be familiar with Lil Nas X here, but there was this kind of big, right, a lot of you are laughing, which I hope, right, exactly. So I've purposely picked, very outstanding popular music for tonight that has impacted society, both, in a great way and maybe not such a great way. So that's one example of, modern music, of what both we and our peers might be exposed to. And then there's this other great question that I want to address tonight is, can we use this popular secular music to point back to the sacred, even imperfectly? So here I have, Eminem, which was a very popular figure as we all were coming of age, early 2000s, even into the 2010s. So, he kind of had a transition during several parts of his life where he near kind of the end of his musical career, he kind of took a look at himself and Hollywood and the way he was living and began to make music about how it wasn't fulfilling, how he had made a bunch of mistakes. And so just because his music doesn't explicitly mention Jesus or God, it's still a way to point people through beauty of that music, however imperfectly, point them back to God, to Christ, to the church. And so, kind of digging further down into music as a lens, once you kind of look through that lens and see the soul of man, how do you even begin to measure that? Do you measure a man's soul in beats, in measures, types of bars? Obviously not. Those are great ways to measure sheet music, not such a great way to measure the character of a man. But that's not to say music doesn't inform about a man's soul, about his man's character. So there's this great quote from Plato's Republic I like. And again, it's kind of a long quote, but I think it really encapsulates the spirit of music as an instrument in which to view man's character. And so Plato writes, musical training is a more potent instrument than any other, because rhythm and harmony find their way into the inward places of the soul, and on which they mightily fasten, imparting grace and making the soul of him who is rightly educated graceful, or of him who is ill-educated ungraceful. And so you already start to see this dichotomy of, hey, some music really brings out the grace in people, but other types of music, perhaps Lil Nas X, brings out a more ungraceful type of demeanor among the listeners. And so kind of I want to dig further down, especially into both that ungraceful impact of music. All right. And so I think it comes as no surprise that unfortunately the age we're living through has a great deal of sicknesses. What comes to my mind in particular is nihilism, materialism, really a loss of any type of romance where any sort of relations has really been boiled down to just, the pure physical. Obviously, I don't think these are really all the sicknesses of our age, but these are ones that I think are most demonstrated in a lot of our most recent music. So under nihilism, you have, bands like Slipknot, maybe even some songs of Nirvana here or there. Kind of considering materialism, obviously Kanye is most famous for his song Gold Digger. That's well before he kind of had his kind of crazy episodes. But as we were coming of age, I'm sure we're all familiar with Ludacris or 50 Cent. A lot of their songs, again, are all about material gain, building that wealth. Nothing else matters. And then most recently, we can consider all of the kind of the trash that has come out with regards to, what a romantic life or lack thereof should look like. So pictured here is Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion. So I think, yeah, Megan Thee Stallion. It's quite a stage name. And so I am abbreviating their song as WAP here, but I'm sure a number of you, are familiar with what that acronym actually stands for. And it doesn't take a lot to kind of look at our modern repertoire of music and, figure out that Nicki Minaj singing Anaconda is, not very enlightening, is not good for the culture. Even other singers like Ed Sheeran, I'm going to pick on him a little bit here, his song Shape of You, it's, beautiful rhythmically, but the verses themselves are so disgusting. So what do we do about this? We're all, men and women of action. We're not just going to sit around. And so what I've become convinced of is even the imperfect beauty will always point back to the divine. Will WAP point you back to the divine? Probably not. But there are other, gems in this garbage heap that we could potentially use. And so many of you know I have a great infatuation with St. Augustine. I know Matt does as well. And so during his conversion, he has this great line from Confessions that says, "Yet I remember the tears I shed, moved by the songs of the church in the early days of my new faith." And so this is just an example, again, pointing to how music can move people to conversion. So Augustine is very well known as a great sinner turned into a great saint. And so kind of in that vein, I myself am a convert. I know Brad is, many of us are. Many of us have friends and family that are converts either from a different faith or from no faith tradition at all. So I absolutely hate the Benedict option. So many of you might have seen that book where we're supposed to go separate ourselves in a little enclave away from civilization. That's not what St. Augustine did. That's not what a lot of the great saints that I admire did. In fact, they went out into the muck. They went out into the mire. So in that similar vein, rather than abandoning secular music, can we wield it as just a conversation starter? Obviously, during Christmas, you're going to hear a bunch of songs about God, but there are 11 other months out of the year. You're not necessarily going to hear those hymns, those Christmas songs in August. So can we use some of that secular music that we're already immersed in, that we hear at the office, that we hear at the mall, that we hear in our car, that we listen to when we're out walking the dog? Can we use some of that to reach out to people, just to start a conversation? And can we go from conversation to using music, that secular music, as a tool for conversion? Obviously, you're not going to hit somebody with Handel's Hallelujah chorus. That's too big of a leap. You're not going to bring out Mozart's, Requiem, again, at the distance between where that person is at and where you want them to go. That's a giant chasm. And can we use the secular music, however imperfect, however broken a road that is, can we start to take some steps to point that person to the divine? And so what I've chosen here are three very mainstream artists, very broken individuals that produced a lot of trash, but also had a good gem here or there. So we have Eminem. 8 Mile Road is, I think, one of his best early works. Nelly, who sang, it's getting hot in here, absolute trash. Also sang, a song called Greet, Hate, Envy, which is a really biting criticism of materialism and the life he was living. And then, of course, I just picked on Ed Sheeran for The Shape of You, but he has this other very beautiful melody called Photograph, where he takes the totally opposite stand, where in The Shape of You, everything is boiled down to the physical, just literally the shape of the woman. But here in Photograph, the only physical description is actually of the woman's eyes. There's no other physical description. It's very pro-romantic in its tenderness. And so this is examples where you can take, these very broken artists. Every artist is broken, some more than others, obviously. And they can still create really great pieces of music that do point people to the divine. So almost none of these songs mention Jesus. They don't really mention God. But yet they still point to lessons or stories within the Bible. So, the human experience is all very universal. There's nothing new under the sun, as we know. And so what we're going to essentially do this evening, I'm not going to take you through each of these three pieces of music. That would take quite a bit of time. But I really want to drill down into this first one, 8 Mile Road by Eminem. Brad had said this is a multimedia sort of day, so I'm not going to disappoint. So I've preemptively pulled out bits of the chorus and a few verses, but as you listen to it, I'm going to take the really, what might sound like an absurd stand is to actually say this rap song is very much harking back to Exodus as a journey of a broken man or a broken people yearning for freedom, and they don't know what that looks like. They don't know what God looks like, but they know that they want to be free. And so, wrong way. All right. Yeah.
said whenever you need me, baby, I'm never too far. But yo, I gotta get out there. The only way I know that I'ma be back for you the second that I blow. Everything I own, I make it on my own. Off the work I go, back to this 8 mile road. I'm a man, gotta make a new plan. Time for me to just stand up and travel new land. Time for me to just take matters into my own hands. Once I'm over these tracks, man, I'ma never look back. And I'm gone, I know right where I'm going. Sorry, mama, I'm grown. I'ma travel alone. Ain't follow the footsteps, I'm making my own. Only way that I know how to escape from this 8 mile. And if you feel it, you didn't, you wouldn't get it. Well, see what the big deal is. Why it wasn't as still as to be walking this borderline of Detroit city limits. It's different, it's a certain significance, a certificate of authenticity. You never even see, but it's everything to me. It's my credibility. You never seen, heard, smell, or met a real MC who's incredible up on the same pedestal as me. But yet, still unsigned, having a rough time. Still on the porch with all my friends that kick dumb rhymes. Go to work and serving season the lunch line. But when it comes crunch time, where do my punchlines go? Who must I show to bust my flow? Where must I go? Who must I know? Or am I just another crab in the bucket? Cause I ain't having no luck with this little rabbit, so fuck it. Maybe I need a new outlet. I'm starting to doubt shit. I'm feeling a little skeptical who I hang out with. I look like a bum. Yo, my clothes ain't about shit at the Salvation Army trying to salvage an outfit. And it's cold, trying to travel this road. Plus I feel like I'm stuck in this battle. My defenses are so up. And one thing I don't want is pity from no one. The city is no fun. There is no sun, and it's so dark. Sometimes I feel like I'm just being pulled apart from each one of my limbs by each one of my friends. It's enough to just make me wanna jump out of my skin. Sometimes I feel like a robot. Sometimes I just know not what I'm doing. I just blow. My head is a stovetop. I just explode. The kettle gets so hot. Sometimes my mouth just overloads the gas that I don't got. But I've learned it's time for me to U-turn. Yo, it only takes one time for me to get hurt. Ain't no falling on next time. I'll meet a new girl. I can no longer play stupid or be immature. I got every ingredient. All I need is the courage. Like I already got the beat. All I need is the words. Got the urge. Suddenly it's a surge. Suddenly a new burst of energy has occurred. Time to show these free world leaders a 3 and a third. I am no longer scared now. I'm free as a bird. Then I turn and cross over the median curve. Hit the burbs and all you see is a blur. 8 mile road. I'm a man. Gotta
All right, so we'll stop it there. We'll go back through the chorus. But yeah, I'm sure it's probably been a while since, the early 2000s where we might have heard that song. And I'm sure, Mr. Slim Shady here, when he was composing this, never would have imagined that a bunch of Catholics would be dissecting his verses, discussing, is this hearkening back to Exodus? Is this very troubled man, living a very universal story of, being trapped, wanting freedom? And so what I've pulled out here is, a little bit of the chorus and a few lines that I think really hearken to specific verses that we might all be familiar with, or at least stories or themes from Exodus or other parts of the Bible that really stand out, especially to me and to a lot of other people during this time of Lent. And so kind of going down through this, one of the first things in the chorus that, has always stood out to me is he says, it's time for me to just stand up and travel to new land. And so whatever Bible story you go through, somebody is always in a hurry going somewhere, being asked to get out of their comfort zone. Finally, at the ripe old age of 90, Abraham was finally told by God, hey, get out of your father's basement. Maybe, take Sarah, go out into the desert, start a new nation. Now, I know that's scary. And at the same time, you got to think here of, Eminem living in his mother's basement in this essentially a ghetto, trying to make something of himself and stepping out and traveling into a new land by himself, not with his mom, not with his siblings, by himself for the first time. And then, once I'm over these tracks, man, I'm never going to look back. And this really stands out in Exodus and Judges. As the Hebrews are leaving Egypt, they're complaining all the time, I want to go back to, slavery. It was nice, it was comfortable, but they know that they can't go back. They can't go back across those railroad tracks. They continue to slip up, and God sends various judges over the centuries. But they've made a new covenant. There's no going back. And so, in a similar vein, one of the verses says, the spirit I had before, I'm trying to regain back the spirit I had before I go back to the same old crap. So again, that spirit of, I want to separate. I know that what I was living before is not correct. You can almost say, in a sense, that Eminem is trying to recapture Eden. He's trying to go back to paradise, the same as we all are. And kind of, again, you go down through the verses, only the single time that God or heaven or Christ or anything religious at all is mentioned, it's one time. It's a petition. I'm begging you, God, please don't let me be pigeonholed into a regular job. So this is a man yearning for freedom who feels captive. And, I always think kind of the St. Irenaeus quote, the glory of God is a man fully alive, somebody who's fully free in Christ. Whether Eminem was thinking of that at the time, I highly doubt it. I don't think he probably has ever heard of St. Irenaeus, but the human capacity and the human yearning for freedom is universal. And kind of as we go further down these quotes, he's yearning for an authenticity. He's yearning to be what he was created to be. He was yearning to be, what we all fall short of. We all fall short of what we eventually were, designed to be. But the final verse of the song before it goes back into the chorus, I am no longer scared now, I'm free as a bird. And of course, in biblical terms, birds often symbolize freedom, especially in Exodus. It's chapter 19, where God directly tells the Hebrews, I will carry you as the eagle carries its young on its wings. I will bring you back to me. So again, I highly doubt Eminem back in 2001 or whenever this was released was thinking about God carrying him on his eagle wings. But again, Eminem was living in a Christian society, a society in which he is breathing in that Christian air, swimming through those waters, and he's understanding something that, hey, I want to be free, and I can attain this freedom by going out of this ghetto, by leaving my mother's home, by really venturing out into the great unknown for the first time. For him, that was a rap career. For many of us, it might be a different type of career. It might be a completely different, personal type challenge. But this song stands out to me really for its anti-nihilism message that, especially in our society currently, especially among a lot of young men, you see this nihilistic tendency, nothing matters, or if something matters, hey, everything matters about the same. So you see kind of nihilism mixed up with this weird strain of relativism. And so I think this is a great example of one of those gems that from modern music can help be an antidote to a lot of the troubled young people that we interact with, whether it's, peers or family or friends. I certainly have a lot of friends still back in Pennsylvania that absolutely adore rap music. Okay. So kind of bringing this back to Lent and bringing this back to some of the conversations that we had earlier about acoustic guitars and Gregorian chant. This Lent, as we think about how do we not only continue to convert ourselves, but what about those that we surround ourselves with? What about our friends, our family that may not practice our faith? And so, I think there's a great opportunity both for Gregorian, chant, where you have the, Kyrie in all its glory. But you can also, you might have an older relative that likes the 80s big hair rock. So there's this great, Kyrie that was sung by the band Mr. And so, I encourage you to listen to it. We're not going to listen to it tonight, but it's very classic 80s, big energy, very energetic, very optimistic. And, you know, we gotta always consider what Paul says. I am all things to all people so that I might save some. He wasn't too concerned about saving some through chant or whether it was going to be through an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar. It wasn't really a concern of his. It was, how do I get to this person's soul? And what tools do I need to get there? And so kind of in closing, you know, with our eyes towards, you know, our own penitence and our own ongoing conversions, the conversions of our secular friends and family this Lent, what I'd like to end with, ladies and gentlemen, is a song by Mr. Bob Dylan. I dreamed I saw St. Augustine. And so this song stands out to me, one, because St. Augustine in his own age and well beyond his own age has been someone that has sought after souls, sought after the conversion of others. And I think Bob Dylan really captures this in this song he sings, I Dreamed I Saw St. Augustine, in which he dreams St. Augustine is back from the dead and calling out to the modern people in the 1970s, hey, everybody, wake up. Don't you see what's happening around you? Okay. So.
I dreamed I saw St. Augustine, alive as you or me, tearing through these quarters in the utmost misery, with a blanket underneath his arm and a coat of solid gold, searching for the very souls whom already have been sold. Arise, he cried so loud, with a voice without restraint. Come out, ye gifted kings and queens, and hear my sad complaint. No martyr is among ye now, whom you can call your own. But go on your way accordingly, but know you're not alone. I dreamed I saw St. Augustine, alive with fiery breath. And I dreamed I was amongst the ones that put him out to death. Oh, I awoke in anger, so alone and terrified. I put my fingers against the glass and bowed my head and prayed.
All right, so that.
North Carolina.
Okay. All right, so that has been the musical talk for the evening.